Wind the clock to 2019 and you'll remember that MG entered our market with this. The Hector, its first SUV and first car offered in India. What it planned to do with this car was rejig the mid-size SUV segment, essentially offering more space, more road presence, more features than all its competitors. And back then, they were fairly successful at it. However, that was back in 2019, a 6-year time gap from then to now. So, given that they've only updated the car once in 2023 with a mid-cycle facelift and they've added a few features here and there, is the Hector still worth buying in 2025? Well, let's find out. My name's Nishmanya, you're watching NB Drives. Let's talk dynamic capabilities of the Hector. Now, this isn't the most engaging car to drive, and there shouldn't be any real surprise with that given how big it is, and it is fairly top heavy also. So it is worth noting in mind this car likes to be driven a little more gently. So I'm coming up to a corner right now and you can feel that body roll. This isn't aided by the fact that this car's suspension is definitely on the softer side. So now that has a plus and a minus. The plus is that your passengers are going to be fairly comfortable, and as somebody driving in the city or being driven around in the city, you do want comfort as your primary thing. But that said, the downside is that when you get to chucking this car around a set of corners, you will feel the suspension softness allowing weight to move, which is why it feels so rolly in the corner. So I'm coming to another one, and let's take this a little faster. Oh, no, it'll do it. It's just not very happy doing so. So it's worth keeping in mind this car is designed primarily to cruise around, not really like carve a canyon out and have fun with it. So that's something you should keep in mind when you're taking your test drive. Now from behind the wheel, the Hector is a fairly comfortable car to drive. I am driving the top spec Savvy Pro model, and this one's fitted with a 1.5 litre turbo petrol engine paired with the CVT automatic gearbox. MG has dropped the dual clutch automatic from its lineup. That was available earlier on when it was launched. It's no longer provided. And another thing, it has also dropped the automatic gearbox option with the diesel engine option. So let me quickly go through the specs of this car. The 1.5 litre makes 143 horsepower and it makes 250 Newton meters of torque. That, as I said, is paired to a CVT gearbox, which means that it is designed to be driven around the city in a very smooth and linear manner, not really to be driven hard, because this gearbox doesn't like getting pressed too much. So if I slam on the throttle, what you will feel is a lot of rubber banding as the engine makes a whole lot of noise, but the speedometer doesn't pick up quite at the same rate. So if you want to drive this car happily, the best thing to do is be gentle with the throttle, have a linear input, and this car likes being driven at 2/3. So if you put your foot down a little more gradually, this car will pick up pace. You just have to give it time to figure itself out, and yeah, you'll be good on highways and everything. However, for a car this size, I do feel the 1.5 litre might be a little too small, or maybe it's just not as peppy as some of the other 1.5s that I've driven, because in the Kushaq, that engine feels lively and ready to go. This one, not quite as much. Also, refinement levels are not as high as you'd expect from a petrol. It still does make a fair amount of noise and it grumbles a little bit. So yeah, not what I was expecting of this petrol. So all in all, that paired with the fact that this is a relatively heavy car, mileage on my tests has not been particularly good. If I quickly cycle through my different screens, I will see that I'm getting a range of 450, and my average on this trip has been, wow, that is 7.8. That's not too bad. I've heard people get far lower in terms of KPL figures. And honestly, I was flooring it a little bit, but I've not driven this in heavy traffic yet. I might check that out and I'll give you my tested figure down in this section of the video or in the pinned comment. So do keep an eye out for that. If we talk about the steering of the Hector, it is fairly light and it is relatively easy to twirl around in the city. This makes it very easy to maneuver around traffic despite this being such a big car. And that'll make it much more approachable for anyone moving from a hatchback or sedan, because a heavy steering and a large car, that is a combination that doesn't work well for first time large car drivers. Another thing that helps that is the view out is very clear. You sit up high and you can see each of the corners of the hood, which make this car fairly easy to place. The view out the back isn't as good. It is a smaller window at the back. It's tapered, so it's not the easiest thing to park, though the 360-degree cameras will be a big help out here. And they've been something I've been relying a lot on to park this car up in some of the tighter spots I've driven to. Now, before I round out the driving impressions, I'm going to quickly talk about the ADAS or Advanced Driver's Assistance System safety features. Some of them are very useful, like the rear cross traffic alert, but many of them, like the forward collision warning and your autonomous emergency braking system, both of these are a little too intrusive in terms of how our country's roads are laid out, how our traffic works, and it really intervenes a little too much. I've had some heart and mouth moments with this car, and I don't think that it is something that you would want to leave on all the time. Maybe when you go out onto the highway, even the lane keep assist is quite useful when you have very well marked lanes and when you can maintain it for a while. If you can't maintain it for a very long time, then there's really no point in leaving that system running, because it'll try to catch on to the half painted lines and it does intervene in terms of keeping you within those lines. So sometimes that won't quite work out for you depending on the kind of road you're driving on. So all in all, I don't think you're losing a whole lot in terms of safety if you don't go for the Savvy Pro version. You could probably go for the model lower, which skips out on the ADAS, and still be very happy with the overall package. I'm now going to try out the performance of the Hector. So I've got an open empty road in front of me. Let's floor it. That is a lot of noise, and only now as it started moving, I'm up to the speed limit, so I'm going to back out. But as you can see, there's quite a bit of delay from the time when you stomp on the throttle and from when it gets going, and it makes a whole lot of noise doing it. So again, drive it at 2/3 and it'll be happy. Otherwise, you are just gonna end up wasting a lot of fuel. That little burst did not help my overall fuel economy at all. Since the Hector's been around for a while now, I'm quickly going to go over the design and tell you the things that I think work for it and the things I think don't. First up, there's this large grille. I think it really works for the Hector despite how odd it looks in pictures, because in person it fits the character of this car really well, given that it's going for road presence, it's going for size. Another thing that's aged well are these split headlights. They look really current and up to date, and I like with the facelift how they squared off the front end with these rectangular headlights. Think it works really well for it. Now, along the sides, I do like that there are 18-inch alloy wheels. MG did hear us all when the car originally launched, and they upsized the rims, which is great. And another thing I think really works is this character line going all the way along the length of the car from the headlights to the tail lights. And that's because it really breaks up the visual mass on the side, which otherwise is a little bulbous. Now, at the rear, the things that I think work are the integrated spoiler and the tail light. I'll also say that this blacked out C and D pillar for the car really helps with the overall aesthetic and helps give the side a little more sportiness and purpose. However, now coming to the things I think do not work well for the car. Those diamond studs on the grille in front, they're a little gaudy, and depending on your personal preferences and tastes, you may or may not enjoy that. Another thing that I don't like is the silhouette of the Hector. I feel like it's a little too MPV-ish, not squared off enough, not as SUV-like. And while MG has increased the wheel size, I think the proportion's still a little off. And I also think that at the rear, the overall bumper has a neat look to it. However, I think there's a little too much chrome at the rear end, which I wish they hadn't added. Now, since the Hector isn't a particularly new car, let's go over the interiors fairly quickly. There's a nice textured and layered dashboard with these really nice soft touch elements here on the passenger side as well as up top out here. They're not the softest, like they're not foamed under, but they're soft plastic. That's a good touch in my book. The rest of the plastics out here, however, are quite scratchy and slightly cheap feeling. So you can see that is the plastics down there on the door cards, even on the door pins. I feel like they could have done a little bit more to elevate the interior feel. And there's the fact that this is a media car and it has done nearly 60,000 kilometers. So it's really been through it. And a typical fair assumption is whatever the media car's kilometer count is, it has gone through wear and tear worth at least twice that much. So you can see there are a few creaky plastics here and there also. That's come through all the testing this car has been through. Now, some of the things that I really like is the view out. You get a very nice and clear view out from here. You sit relatively high up, and people who like that large SUV feel will feel really at home out here. The other thing worth noting are that these seats, they're quite comfortable. They are ventilated, and both the front seats on this top spec model are electrically adjustable. However, this one's only 4-way electrically adjustable, while the driver's seat is 6-way adjustable. No memory functions, by the way. And a little note, these seats have a little too much lumbar for my liking. That varies from person to person, so you guys should check that out on your test drive. Now, in terms of the other amenities you get in here, well, you have a single zone climate control. It is automatic, and you get this neat button down here which you can press and you can get max AC. So for those hot summer days, that's a nice shortcut to have, and it feels like they've thought about our market a little bit out here. The other thing you get is this massive infotainment screen. This is 14 inches, and while it isn't quite as big as the one I saw in the Windsor that I reviewed a couple of weeks back, I'll link that video somewhere up here. It is quite large and it has a wow factor, also because it's portrait. So there is a fair amount of functionality baked into this. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of everything being baked into the screen, and that is sort of the case out here. The thing that really takes me off a little bit here is the fact that when you have Android Auto running, you have no direct control for climate control. So what you have to do is you have to click out of your Android Auto, then change your AC, then go back into it. That's a little frustrating, to be honest, and most people are going to find that very irritating, especially on the move. That said, you do get wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Both are big pluses and they work for me fairly well. There's also a nice wireless charger out here, which is quite convenient because when you're using wireless CarPlay, you will lose charge quick, and it makes a difference having a wireless charger. It just makes life a little easier. I will say that at least the screen is reasonably responsive. It does lag behind a little bit in some pages when you're switching menus, but I think that's more down to the processing power than the responsiveness of the screen. And you also get a digital instrument cluster, which is quite convenient because you can get a fair amount of information displayed on it, and it is good to have things like your tire pressure monitor up on your screen so that you know everything's working smooth. Also note there are quite a few cubby spaces in here, but there's not a whole lot of overall storage. So like there are 2 cubbies out here, you can fit small bottles but nothing larger. The center armrest also has storage below, but again it's not particularly large, which is a little bit of a shame. And the door bins are big, but like you can't put really large bottles in it. So it's an odd mix of having space to keep things but just not being big enough for like large items, which I think would be a little frustrating on a road trip. Now let's check the rear seats out. Now I'm here at the rear and you can see the sunroof is open. This panoramic sunroof is very large. Actually, MG says it is segment leading and it feels it. There's a lot of light that comes in and I really like how open the cabin feels. That is aided by this beige interior color scheme, beige and black. However, these seats do get a little dirty, so you're gonna have to do a little more effort maintaining them. Not as bad as white seats, but still. Now here in the rear you have a few amenities missing, but I'll first quickly walk you through everything you do get. So you get two AC vents which can be adjusted for airflow, quite nice. You get one USB port out here. It is a regular USB cable, not a type C one, so keep that in mind. There's a little storage cubby down here, not much you can put in there, maybe a few tissues but not much else. There is a seat back pocket and that's about it. Oh no, wait, you get independent headrests for each of the seats. You get a nice armrest which falls fairly ergonomically and has two cup holders, always a big plus. And the big party trick of this rear seat is the recline. So there's a lever on the side which you can press. It not only reclines the back but also raises your seat bench a little bit, giving you a little more under thigh support, and that's really nice. With all this, you can see this seat is set to my driving position. I am 6 foot tall and I have about 3-4 inches of knee room, which is pretty good. And this reclined position, I have about an inch, inch and a half of headroom. But let me bring this forward again. Yeah. So if I'm sat a little more upright, you'll see headroom's a little lower, about an inch worth of headroom. That is fairly common with any car with a panoramic sunroof. Holds true here as well. However, all in all, this is a very spacious back seat. Now, the things that you do miss out in the rear. There is no sun blind, and as many of you will know, I really like that feature, especially for our climate. People who don't enjoy getting sunburnt, they really need that screen. So it's a little bit of a miss out here. And there's the fact that there's no independent climate zone here either, not even a 2-zone climate. So that's a little bummer as well. Also worth noting that you don't get any multimedia mounts or screens. So if that's a deal breaker for you, you might want to look at another option or look at an aftermarket fix. And there's the fact that the ambient lighting, while pretty decent in the front, at the rear it's just a little bit of a bulb under the armrest. So it doesn't look quite as fancy as what some of its competitors do. Specifically something like the Harrier. You can check my review of that car out here as well.
Also, as you can see, the rear glass doesn't go all the way down, and that does make the rear feel a little hemmed in even when you roll down the windows. I'll also mention that the 8 speaker Infinity sound system is pretty decent, but it isn't as good as some of its competitors. And I found that in this specific car, at least, the sound stage was quite flat. So that did leave me wanting a little more.
Also, before we move to the boot, I'll show you that because this is a white car, there's plenty of space to seat 3, and the fact that there's a flat floor, that's also a big plus. Though I would say that if you're taller, you might find headroom a little tight in the middle. Also, the seat is quite stiff here in the center, so yeah, it's best used as like the extra seat. Primarily, this is most comfortable for the 4 occupants, so 2 on the outer seats here and 2 on the front seats. Though let me know, what do you guys think? Do you like the overall package of the interior, and is this something that sway you to purchase the Hector? Now coming to the boot, you can see this top spec model has an electrically opening tailgate, which is quite nice. And the other big thing about this boot is it's quite large. It's 580 odd liters of boot space. This is my camera bag. It's about 28 liters. You can see the boot really gobbles it up. And if you are to put a few suitcases in, you can definitely get 3 mid-size plus some overnight bags, or 2 really large suitcases and a few small duffel bags here and there. It's very practical. Also, there is additional space underneath, so you can store a few more smaller items. However, no space saver spare wheel, which is a little bit of a letdown. Summing up the Hector, there is still a lot to like about this car, and its space is still a forte. It's quite comfortable, and it's still got plenty of features, at least to keep up with its competition. Only in a few areas does it lag behind, as I mentioned over this review, but on the whole, it is a very strong package. Another area I think it's a little let down is its engine options. The 1.5 litre turbo petrol isn't quite punchy enough for a car of this size, and the CVT gearbox, while smooth, isn't the most reactive, especially out on the open road. That said, I really do like the turbo diesel version of this car. I have liked it the first time I drove it and subsequently also. However, they have discontinued the automatic gearbox with that, which is a little bit of a letdown. And I do think if anybody is going to be getting this as a chauffeur driven car, that is the better package to have. The diesel manual, as it'll give you better mileage and it will also be reasonably good out on the open road. Then we come to the pricing of this car, which I have listed around there, and it is still fairly competitive with the segment, especially when you consider that the petrol version of this car starts at 14 lakh and goes up to around 19 odd lakhs, which is for the Savvy Pro version I'm driving with the ADAS. If you get it without ADAS, it's a little cheaper, and I don't think you're losing a whole lot with the overall package if you don't have ADAS. That said, the diesel version can go up to 20 lakh, and if you're going for the Hector Plus, which has the extra seats in the rear or the option of captain seats in the second row, that is about 50,000 rupees more expensive than the standard Hector. So do keep that in mind. All this said, I think in my rating scale, the Hector should definitely be something you consider if space and comfort are your priorities. However, if you want something a little more dynamically capable, check out my review of the Skoda Kushaq that is pinned here. Or alternatively, if you want to know what my favorite all-rounded mid-size SUV is, you can check out the video in the description or in the pop-up banner up there to get my pick on that. Until next time, cheers.